Dear learners, welcome. Today we will discuss about the landslides, its types and causes. Landslide is a serious geological hazard. It is an annual and recurring phenomena. It is a major chronic problem primarily because of the rugged topography, unfavorable hill slopes, heavy and prolonged rainfall. Development activities and exploitation of natural resources in the hilly region have further aggravated this problem. It is particularly common during the monsoon, affecting communication, loss of property and sometimes even the human life. It also damages natural resources and disturbs the ecosystem and environment. Well, let us see the landslide hazard map of India. It shows that in the Himalayan terrain it is very high and it is high in the northeastern hill ranges and moderate in the western Ghat and Nilgiris. Severity, it comes down from the Himalayan terrain, from the northeastern region, then western Ghat, Nilgiris and eastern Ghat and the Vindhyan. We all know about the effect of the landslide. It causes substantial damage to agriculture and forest wealth, roads, telecommunication and major engineering structures. It has great impact on injury and loss of life and damage to the properties. It also causes blocking of the rivers, channels, thereby forming a huge lakes which when burst creates flash flood causing much heavy losses. The nation suffers heavy monetary loss every year because of the landslides. It is enormous. When cumulative figures are taken, you will be surprised that total estimate cost for loss of property is nearly 2 billion rupees per annum in this landslide incidences. Thus, these landslide hazards have very serious impact not only on socio-economic structure of the region, but also in disruption accompanied misery to the human life. You see, any landslide is not a disaster. Landslide basically is a hazard, but when this landslide affect any lost property or the life, then it becomes a disaster. Let us see the effect and sign of the landslides. Well, tilted telephone poles, retaining walls or sometimes trees, you see it takes a turn near the slope. Cracks in the foundation can be seen, even in the houses, you can the side walls and the driveways of the houses. Even the cracks are developed on the ground and the roads, and sudden emergence or stoppage of flowing water or falling of stones or boulders from the hill slopes are also the early warning of a landslide. Now, let us understand the landslide. In fact, landslides are downward and outward movement of soil or rock mass that may be set off by one or more causes under the influence of gravity. Various people have used different terms for landslides such as mass wasting, mass movement, slope failure and slope movement. Mass movements can range in magnitude from soil creep to huge landslides. Now, there are various terminologies that we use in case of landslides. Let us see crown. The top portion of a landslide is a crown. Then flanks, both sides, that refers to the portion of the slides with undisplaced material adjacent to the sides of the rupture surface. Then head of the slide is the upper part of the landslide along the contact between the displaced material and the main scarp, and foot is the portion of the landslide that has moved beyond the toe of the surface of rupture that overlies the original ground surface, and main body is the main part of the displaced material of the landslide that overlies the surface of rupture between the main scarp and toe of the surface of rupture. Main scarp is a steep surface on the undisturbed ground of the upper edge of the landslide, which is caused by the movement of displaced material away from the undisturbed ground. It is visible part of the surface of the rupture. A minor scarp is a steep slope on displaced material which is produced by the differential movement within the displaced material. Surface of rupture. surface that forms lower boundary that displaces the material below the original ground surface is the surface of rupture, and this is very important to study or to know what is the surface of rupture. Then accumulation, it is a volume of the displaced material which has fallen from the top and has been accumulated on the ground surface. Well, toe is the lowest, usually curved margin of the displaced material of a landslide. It is the most distinct part from the main scarp. Now, let us see the types of landslide. The first category is the falls. It refers to the abrupt movement of the slope material that becomes detached from steep slope or cliffs. Most of the movement occur by free fall or by rolling or bouncing. Depending upon the type of slope material, it may be called as rock fall, debris fall or soil fall. You see, when we talk about rock fall, it is a mass of the rock of any size detached from a steep slope or cliff that descend mostly through the air by free falling. And when we talk of the debris fall, it is the same as rock fall, but the material is smaller. It is in forms of debris. Likewise, the soil fall, it is the same as the rock fall, but the material involved is the soil. Then we have the topple. Next category is topples. It refers to those blocks of rock that tilt or rotate forward on a pivot or hinge. Again, it can be called as rock topple, debris topple or soil topple depending upon the type of the material. So, rock topple, forward rotation of a unit under the action of gravity of the other forces that created by the adjacent unit or by fluid in cracks. Now, next category is the slides. It refers to the movement caused by the finite shear failure along one or more surface of the rupture, which are visible or whose presence may reasonably be inferred. Very slow movement of the slide is called, a photograph shows a creep of in lower Dibang Valley, where the road has creeped down. Well, creep is an extremely slow down movement of dry superficial matter. Movement of the soil occurs in the region which are subjected to freeze thaw conditions. Slides are of two types, it is rotational and translational. Rotational slides refer to a failure which involves slight movement on a circular or near circular surface of failure. They generally occur on slopes of homogeneous clay, shale, weathered rocks and soil. The movement is more or less rotational about an axis parallel to the contours of the slope. Such slides are characterized by a scarp at the head which may be nearly vertical. These slides may be single rotational, multiple rotational or successive rotational types. Single rotational slides, a failure which involves sliding movement on a circular or semicircular failure surface, and multiple rotational slides, it manifold development of rotational movements that includes two or more slip blocks, each with a curved slip surface tangential to a common generally deep seated surface. It may be superimposed or juxtaposed. Now, coming to successive rotational slide, as for rotational slip, but a successive slide consists of a assembly of individual rotational slips down a slope, often of a shallower undulation form. Translation slides are non-rotational block slides involving mass movement on more or less planar surface. The movement of translation slide is controlled by weak surfaces such as bedding, joints, foliation, faults and shear zones. The slide material may range from unconsolidated soils to slab of the rock and the debris, and these are classified as block slides, slab slides and debris slides depending upon the material involved. As I mentioned, block slides are translational slides in which the moving mass consists of a single unit of a rock block that moves down slope. It often possesses a graben at its head. Slab slide as similar as for the block slide, but is fine material. It may not possess a graben because it may occur on a steeper slope. Then debris slide, a translational slide, it covers debris that consists of many semi-independent units of disrupt nature, which may later adopt other forms of movement and may turn into a very rapid form, may be called as debris avalanche. It is a slide of a block. Now, coming to these translational slides, which are planar. In this, the rock slide, it is a translational and planar movement of rock units, usually on a steep bedded slope. It may develop into rocks of debris avalanche fall. And mudslide, relatively planar movement of softened argillaceous material, moving mainly on a pronounced silicon side shear surface. It advances chiefly by sliding in elongated form on steeper straight slopes or lobate. The next category is the spread. It refers to the failure caused by the liquefaction, where saturated and loose sediments are transformed into liquid state. Normally, earthquakes are responsible for this phenomena. Well, flow. It refers to a rapid movement of material as a viscous mass. It may be called as debris flow, mud flow or rock avalanche, depending upon the nature of the material involved in the movement. Debris flow. It is a rapid movement of material which consists a high proportion of coarse fragments, other granular solids, water and air. It often possesses pronounced levees and may have a sinus ridge form on hill slope and the fans. Likewise, mud flow is same as the debris flow, but is composed of fine material. As you can see, a culvert has slipped down in one of the regions in the hilly. Well, other than this, we have also complex landslides. It is a category in which combination of two or more number of above type of movements are involved, such as rock fall plus debris flow. It may be rock slide plus rock avalanche, it may be topple plus rock, etc. So, these are the complex landslides. Now, let us know what are the causes of the landslides. Broadly it is the slope failure, deforestation, unscientific forming, hydrostatic pressure, earthquake shocks, intense rainfall and cloud burst, and the development and engineering activities. Now, let us see one by one. In case of slope failure, it is generally the steeper the slope, the greater is the likelihood of occurrence of a landslide. Landslide is a gravitational phenomena, hence slope angle has a direct relation with the slope stability. As the slope angle increases, the gravitational forces increase, thereby reduces the stability. Slope becomes a concern when they achieve a critical state of natural equilibrium. It becomes more critical when rock mass overhang along the downslope. Deforestation. Due to deforestation, soil of the area becomes loose and fine material is eroded. Thus, pore spaces are developed, which during the rains are filled with water that acts as lubricant to induce downhill movement of material, debris, etc. Barren slopes are more prone to erosion that causes landslides, and land use changes such as conversion of vegetative slopes into build up area also induce landslides. Now, another important cause is the intense rainfall and cloud burst. Very heavy downpour of rain suddenly at one place. High rainfall coupled with drainage network causes weakening of the sediments and is also responsible for high erosion, seepage, weathering and leaching that all leads to triggering landslides. It is apparent that surface morphology and subsurface sediments play a major role in surface runoff and heavy seepage. Joint planes and cracks in rocks and coarse grain sediments, loose boulder beds and other such material all favors water percolation, and that cause excessive water pressure within the sediments. It is also known as hydrostatic pressure. It ultimately increases shear stresses and decreases shear strength of the sediments. The pore pressure also increases due to sudden rise in water table for one reason or the other. As a result, the mass falls down or creeps slowly depending upon the lithology, volume of mass, gradient, etc. Toe erosion. It is another important cause. It is mainly along the rivers, where river water flows towards the bend of the river with high velocity in its outer edge. It causes rise in water level due to centrifugal force. As gravity pulls the water downward, water currents develop a rolling spiral velocity against the bank that erodes away the sediments. It creates an overhanging of the sediments which collapse due to the weight of the rock mass. Earthquake shocks is another important cause. Earthquake shocks reduces the shearing resistance along the fracture zones or joint planes, which in turn induce landslides. In fact, loose and unconsolidated sediments on the steep slopes become vulnerable with the earthquake tremor, and that induce landslides. Unscientific farming, particularly in the hilly region, the terrace cultivation of crops like paddy, cardamom, etc., that all needs standing water, and this water slowly seeps inside the ground and supersaturate the hillside, which may cause landslides. Now, most important is the developmental and engineering activities, the human interference. The landslide problem has further been aggravated due to the anthropogenic activities, that is the human interference. Use of high powered explosive during construction of roads, dams or bridges, etc., may cause shattering of the rocks, and later during the rainy season, water within the fracture zone may cause landslides. The human interference has contributed significantly, causes instability of the slopes, mainly in form of hill cutting for construction of individual houses and urban agglomeration. In fact, nowadays people are cutting the natural hill slopes in a tableland for construction of buildings without considering the engineering aspect. The removal of lateral support by man's activity is another cause of slope failure. The overloading of the hill slope is also responsible for landslides. As you can see here, a retaining wall has been built to save the house, but such retaining walls, when made unscientifically, they get toppled, resulting into unfortunate tragedies. Likewise, sewer water seepages from townships or villages, if this water is not channelized, it can induce instability of the hill slopes. Thus, human interference is also one of the major causes of the landslides. Now, we have just learnt what is a landslide and what are the types and causes. As you can see, the various causes, but most important the human interference, which causes landslides most. Thank you.